My life is but a tapestry of rich and royal hues, an everlasting vision of the ever-changing view. Oh, wondrous woven magic in bits of blue and gold, a tapestry to feel and see, impossible to hold. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, family and friends, zooming in from across the globe. The lyrics of this song best describe my life. A little trivia about this song. The song Tapestry is from singer-songwriter Carole King's second music album, also by the same name, released in 1971. And in 1972, it won 4 Grammys for the Best Album, Best Female Vocalist, Best Song for You've Got a Friend, and Record of the Year. And I got to buy this album in 1972 with my first salary. It is now getting to be a family heirloom. Tapestry best defines me, as I was never trained to have a career, but a variety of opportunities came my way. And looking back, I can see how these varied experiences and the many hats I have worn are so smoothly interwoven. 1972 was a year of many firsts for me. I completed my undergrad studies in 1972, left the security and comfort of my parental home to start work on my first job that year. And it was also the year I met the man I flipped for, and we married 3 years later. More about 1972 in the course of the next half hour. As a schoolgirl, I loved poetry, and it stemmed from being able to learn and recite by heart. Like lyrics in music, I engaged with rhythm and the musicality of words in a poem. When one is hooked to poetry, then every thought, every sight, every sound, every emotion impacts me in a way that has my creative juices flowing. I write because I think and because I feel. Let me give you an example. These were my first thoughts when I woke up to the sound of someone in my neighborhood trying to kickstart his scooter. I wrote this poem some 6 years ago. The air feels fresh as a new day dawns. In the vicinity, a man tries to kickstart his scooter into life, breaking the silence and the early morning calm, polluting the air we breathe. Grish, 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 he kicks. Splutter, splutter. The engine coughs and groans. While his leg tires with all that shuffling, the right wrist hurts with throttling. Reluctantly, the spark plug connects. He heaves a sigh and is finally on his way. The noise, it fades, leaving behind a trail, a haze of toxic, polluted air. This year, in August 2024, marked the 30th death anniversary of my mother, and there was a trigger that resulted in my writing this poem. Remembering Mother. Relaxing in bed, reading the news online, when out of nowhere you wafted in and lingered for a while. Mama, is it you visiting? I just sat still, inhaling all your too familiar perfume, and then you were gone. Is there something you wanted to say, Mama? I tried to read deep into your presence today. Or were you just letting me know that you have my back and are still watching over me? Recently, 2 of my poems were published in an anthology, Cityscapes. The first one, Pulikutty Upperi, is a dedication to my mother-in-law. Pulikutty Upperi, a legacy. Their cuisine was different, and so was the Tamil they spoke. Delicious, said I. The vegetable she cooked that triggered off a gleeful smile. Summoning me to sit beside her with diary and pen in hand, she rattled off in a Malayalam Tamil that was so hard to comprehend. In Coimbatore, that hot summer afternoon, the visuals have stayed in my mind's eye. Her moment of glory to teach her son's wifey something she hoped would be her legacy. My vocabulary increased as I tried to figure Varakai, Katharikai, Elambuchipalam, Orupidi, Pacha Arsi, and so on and so forth. She went on and on. The depth of her palm forming a cup with her thumb across her fingers ran, replicating measurements of each ingredient. Her tried and tested, never failed recipe was word for word noted down. This Pulikutty Upperi makes a perfect side for a bland diet of lentils and rice. Vegetables cooked in tamarind water, tempered and rolled in coarsely ground spice. Not just a hit within the family, but amongst extended family and friends too. Her recipe shared like a foreword many times, her legacy for generations kept alive. I spent much of my growing up years in Bangalore. With my father in the Air Force, we did move every few years, but had frequent postings in Bangalore. And in my flying years, I got a bird's eye view of my city with its boundaries well defined. My memories of this city in the early 1970s are reflected in this poem, Lost in a Heartbeat. If this picture speaks 1,000 words, then the image in my mind's eye speaks loud and clear. It goes back to 50 years to a favorite memory. The aircraft's descent, the aerial view from my jump seat as the final approach begins. I see clouds of smoky white reflected in the lake below, interrupted only by green casuarinas, an image brush-stroked into life, forever enduring. But look what they've done to them, Ma. Look what we have done. We drained our lakes, steamrolled our forests. Now only steel and concrete remain, piercing the clouds. Way back then, a road trip from Bangalore to Madras meant that one left the city behind, traveled through uninhabited spaces before one entered Madras. But today, Chennai, erstwhile Madras, feels like an extension of Bangalore and vice versa. And only a huge signage across the road welcomes you into the other state. My next poem, Urban Paradise, also published in Cityscapes, is an extension of Lost in a Heartbeat. This poem laments the loss of this once beautiful city. Urban Paradise. Boarding the 6:30 morning bus to a school so far away, verdant land and casuarina forest greeted us along the way. The journey covered in a breeze, still fresh for the day's school routine. No sweltering summers, pleasant weather, its sobriquet, pensioners' paradise. Leaving behind grey skies and haze, landing in my hometown of Bangalore, clouds of various shapes and sizes were reflected in the many lakes below. Over the years, I saw the skyline change. Shrunken lakes and steamrolled forests, heartbreaking as it were, replaced now by steel and concrete. As the years went by, an aerial view of the earth below, for miles and miles on end, is now a jungle of buildings on lakes that had been reclaimed. Lakeview and meadows, daffodils and tulips, woods and temple trees are not what adorn our city, but names of high-rise buildings. The city burst at its seams, stretching far and wide. The infrastructure couldn't keep pace. No more pensioners' paradise. There are two incidents from 1972 that I want to share with you, but to put them in perspective, I need to talk about the two wars that India was involved in 1965 and 1971. Upfront and personal. The two wars that India was forced to engage in 1965 and 1971 touched me in ways that left an indelible mark. Actually, let me go back in time to maybe even the Chinese aggression of 1962. My memory is of all the ladies on the military campus spending their free hours knitting sweaters for our soldiers who battled it out in inclement conditions. Not wanting to be left out, we Air Force children, under the guidance of our older siblings and friends, put up a variety show where the audience donated generously to the Red Cross Society. In 1965, during the Indo-Pak War, though we were based in the South, we darkened our windows and went through mock drills, and at the sound of air raid sirens, we jump into trenches or nervously hide under our desks at school. At that point in time, I had no idea that the war would not extend to the South. But what did affect me was the fact that the 1857 consecrated St. Paul's Church in Ambala had been bombed in an error of judgment. The target, however, could have been the Air Force Base or the Air Force Hospital, or maybe even the runway. In 1972, I got to live in a house diagonally opposite this bombed church in Ambala. I saw the ruins every day. The Sunday church service was now being conducted in a fairly large room in the pastor's house. During the 4 months I lived there, I played the organ by ear during the church service. I feel a sense of closure, of a pain I was not conscious of, and playing the organ for the hymns we sang was very therapeutic and healing. Today, the ruins of St. Paul's Church is a heritage site. As a young girl, badminton was my favorite game. I was so clued in on the fact that Damayanti Subedar was the national badminton champ. She went on to marry a fighter pilot who was based in Ambala. As most of you probably know, in 1971, West Pakistan and East Pakistan were at war with one another. That resulted in the birth of Bangladesh. India intervened for less than a week in December 1971. Damayanti's husband, Flight Lieutenant Thambe, took off from the Ambala base, never to return. He was shot down and taken prisoner of war. Passing by their home almost every day, where they spent their very brief wedded life together, always saddened me. I have followed Damayanti's life of her heading the sports department at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I have watched her over television and believe in the strength of her conviction that her husband continued to be a POW along with 53 other fellow Indian soldiers in Pakistan jails. I had hoped for closure for these families that have waited for the return of a husband, a father, a son, a brother, one way or another. The world over, families are broken. Grief from loss is universal. This is what war does. In war, there is never a winner. There is no question of you win some, you lose some. Both sides are losers. My next poem is about the 20-year war in Vietnam between 1955 and 1975. Price of freedom. Each day when the sun sets in the west, those killed in Vietnam are laid to rest. Orphaned, crippled, homeless and destroyed, broken in body, spirit, mind, and soul. No one hears their cry of anguish. For them, the bells do not toll. What use in drafting young men to uncalled wars in a foreign land? They return home lost, battered by all they have endured, with post-traumatic stress disorder, memories that with time do not blur. The image of the napalm girl on the South Vietnamese road, running naked as a 9-year-old, made it to the cover of the Time magazine. This issue, full of pictures unseen, could not change the war theme. Running from the dictatorial regime, the fearful Vietnamese took to watery routes. Both people, seeking refuge in lands unknown, were tossed around in uncharted seas. With the moon their only guiding light, torn from their families, never to reunite. If man was created in God's own image with qualities of love and peace, love thy neighbor is an eyewash when greed and power and desire to control kills humanity, crushing human rights at its very core. Earlier this year, our friends from 40 years ago came to spend the day with us. During the course of our time together, I realized that my friend's husband showed traces of being forgetful. My poem, Role Reversal, is in memory of that day. As she took leave, she hugged me tight, holding me to draw energy from my body, and I transmitting positivity. The last 2 years of her life, trying, testing, drawing every drop of strength from her reservoir to carry on. The mental fatigue so escalating as her partner's faculties slowly diminishing. Weighed down by projects incomplete, her priorities shifted to care and protect her husband of 45 years. Now disoriented, losing control of all logic. A brilliant mind now wasted by the vagaries of time. Like a helpless child, so dependent, trusting and obeying her every command, delivered with the gentleness of a mother's voice, assuring him of her love, care, and support, taking charge of their lives once and for all. Aging, she is, but walking tall. Building bridges. We walked 100,000 miles together through all kinds of weather, in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad, with stealth. We walked around the Kaikundranahalli Lake, through the Kusumi jungles in Uttar Pradesh, through snow-covered mountains of Ladakh, with the chill winds that felt like an icy blast. The foothills of the Himalayas, the meadows of Yosemite, feeling insignificant amid the tall redwood forests, reveling in nature's bounty. We walked in Singapore, in the garden by the bay, and relived our childhood in Disneyland in LA. Walked around the baobab tree somewhere near Limpopo. Walked on the Rocky Mountains and picked the glistening crystal of the river in Colorado. How would you like to be down by the Seine with me? What will I give for a moment or two under the bridges of Paris with you? And on the boardwalks of Fisherman's Wharf and Pier 39. At Cape Agulhas, where the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans meet, bridging nature's benevolence with man-made creations. Heading towards our 50th year, I raise a cheerful toast to all the bridges that we built, to all the bridges that we couldn't resist. Feel like a lonesome tumbleweed, turning a end over end. Once I pulled all my roots free, I became a slave to the wind, just a slave to the wind. Feel like a lonesome tumbleweed, turning a end over end. Once I pulled all my roots free, I became a slave to the wind. For more than half my life, a military kid, a military wife, a tumbleweed I've been, uprooting and moving, and in a new space tried to settle in. Parting with teachers I began to love, and friends I made along the way. To new places and schools I went, always having to prove myself before recognition and acceptance came. And just when a level of comfort set in, it was time to up and move again. A constant reminder that this is my life, and I, in turn, must learn to adjust. Looking back in my sunset years of this beautiful land that I did traverse, exposed to diverse cultures, cuisines, customs, art forms, and languages, so many differences in attire and manners. Yet, what greets me is our unifying lightness. To the unique experiences that I've had, and sometimes comparing myself to a walnut that burst out of its protective shell and yet not cracking up when it fell. Only time did show what all the frequent travel did bring, a tapestry of very joyous memories. I wish I had known then what I know now, that in constant change was the celebration of the life I've led, and in gratitude, I bow my head. I will end with a poem I wrote based on a story that my school principal told us at the school assembly in late 1960s. Something like 70 years and more, I heard a story that lingered in my mind and in my soul. Wanting to focus on work undisturbed, a father, a world map he tore asunder. Hoping to keep him occupied, he challenged his son to piece together. Before long, the boy was done, leaving his father amazed at how one of age so tender could fix a puzzle straight. On the other side, dear father, was the picture of a man. When I put all of him together, it set the world to rights. Thank you and good night.